We're going live. And there we go. All right. We are live. We are back. Wild card weekend did not disappoint. We've got divisional weekend coming up here in just a few days. Mark and I are going to go over both of those. Really excited to have you here with us to discuss these. And of course, it wouldn't be the show. It wouldn't be, a live stream without addressing some of the most recent news that's come down. Of course, we've got some head coach movement going on. Primarily, the New England Patriots have announced they are securing Mr. Mike Vrabel to be their new head coach. That was the writing on the wall, the very unsurprising news that came down. Maybe some that was a little more surprising, though, Mark, was today it was announced that Mike McCarthy will no longer be a member of the Dallas Cowboys, as it was worded weirdly that they couldn't come to an agreement, which basically was Jerry Jones saying, you're not staying anymore. So Mike McCarthy, now a free agent. What do we make of the two moves? And I guess you could start with McCarthy there being the most recent.
Well, I'll just quickly say Vrabel was like a no-brainer, right? As soon as Gerard Mayo news happened, and we talked about that last week, it was like, fuck. Every person from the Jets to the Jags to the Bears, the Saints, who all wanted Vrabel, it was a big, like, we're screwed. And to me, what I found really interesting is all the reports that I'm reading is that the McCaskies, George especially, made a last-minute push the night before Vrabel signed with the Patriots, like called the agent and made a last-minute push for more time.
Interesting.
And what's so frustrating about that is it's like apparently they were so impressed with him in the Zoom, but that's all they did was a Zoom, where the Jets had him in person, the Patriots had him in person, and maybe they felt like they knew it wasn't going to happen. And then George was just so impressed. And it's like, hey, can you just give us more time? Let's get you back in here. And I think
they had to know the whole time that they were that's part of the reason you fire your head coach mid-season. You get a jump start on some of
and
this
that's
stuff.
What's so embarrassing about it's what's been so embarrassing about the Bears in general is I think what they did in that time since they fired Eberflus in Thanksgiving was they compiled the list, right? Because they came out with the list right away and all the requests, right? And they've slowly added a couple names to that, but that first like day or two that they could put the requests out, that list was long. And now they've added names like the Iowa State head coach, Marcus Freeman, the Notre Dame head coach. They finally added Cliff Kingsbury. He agreed. They requested the meeting. Listen, Mike Vrabel, I'll focus on him. Him in New England makes a ton of sense. I think already you hear people like Colin Cowherd. He was spouting off today. Mike Vrabel, he's picking the Patriots to make the playoffs next year, like to be the surprise team, like DeMeco Ryans and the Texans were 2 years ago, like the Commanders were this year. I think it makes a lot of sense.
They got their quarterback, so yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. They have a ton of cap space. I think if you're Mike Vrabel, you're in a really great spot. The bummer will be, and I think it'll be interesting, if it doesn't work with Drake May, does Vrabel get the blame, or is it more he wasn't the right guy and now we're going to give Vrabel another quarterback? So I think that'll be the thing to watch out for, and that we'll be able to really have a better thought on where that conversation's going in a year from now. But there's going to be a lot of hype for the New England Patriots starting in the 2025-2026 season. I'm certainly feeling like I'm going to be riding that hype train as well. I think it's a home run hire. I think wherever he went would have been a home run hire, and happy for New England fans. They're so happy for them.
Yeah. Well, Mike McCarthy, on the other hand, is an interesting case because obviously he's had success in Dallas for the most part. He didn't have his quarterback for the majority of the season, so you can kind of give a pass for what's happened there. But he won with Cooper Rush. What was it, a year or two ago? And
he won with Cooper Rush again. They won 7 games.
Yeah. So you almost you scratch your head at the move. But at the end of the day, this is Jerry Jones. This is the Dallas Cowboys, and this is kind of what we've come to expect from that organization. Mike McCarthy is one of those guys that will, if he wants to be, will be a head coach next year for some team.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So, it's one of those where people say, oh, fire this guy. People are going to be chomping at the bit to get him. I do think, though, at the end of the day, it kind of ran its course as well, because I think this is a win for Mike McCarthy at the end of the day. The Dallas Cowboys aren't going anywhere, Mark. At least they're not going anywhere that's worth um, sticking around for. Because at the end of the day, they have a capped ceiling, and we'll get to the Pittsburgh Steelers because I feel the same way there. But they have a capped ceiling in Dallas, and Mike McCarthy can go to several other organizations right now and kind of put his fingerprints all over it. Where in Dallas, as we know, with Jerry Jones there, you don't have that opportunity. So I think it's almost like he's free now in many respects. And I think it's going to be a beneficial move for him at the end of the day.
Yeah, so let me pick up that conversation and just keep going before I go like the Bears and Mike McCarthy, just in Mike McCarthy in general. I agree with you 100%. And he really is free. Like his contract ran up. It wasn't a firing. He was a free agent. They didn't extend him. They started to have the talks. What I think Mike McCarthy held all the power when those talks began. Basically said, listen, you strap me with an old quarterback. We're paying a ton of money. We don't have a ton of cap space. We don't have young, explosive players. You got to figure out what you're doing with Micah Parsons. And I, if I was Mike McCarthy, I bet him and his agent said, we want 5 years. Like we want a 5-year deal. We want security through whatever the heck the next 2 years of chaos are going to be as we try to rebuild this team. And I bet that slightly offended Jerry. And I think Jerry probably thought, no, we're win now. Like we should have won, and it's your fault.
Because they're always win now. Yeah,
Jerry's a psycho, and I think if you're a Cowboys fan, you should be pretty frustrated because if they were going to fire Mike McCarthy, they should have done it last week because now they can't actually do Zoom interviews with Ben Johnson, with Aaron Glenn, with all these guys. The way the rules work, they can only interview people who are not current NFL head coaches. So yeah, they could bring in a Pete Carroll, but they didn't get to talk to Mike Vrabel. They could bring in a Bill Belichick, but again, they're not getting to talk with Ben Johnson for another week. Like they're behind.
Well, and again, remind me why that is the case, because why the Bears could do an interview with Ben Johnson and the Cowboys can't.
If you're going to interview a coach who's on a playoff team, you were allowed to do Zoom interviews that first week.
In the window. Okay.
In the window. And you had to already had fired your coach. But because they had a coach, they couldn't sign up for those Zoom interviews. And now that they have no coach, that window is closed until now your team has been ousted. So they could talk to Arthur Smith. They could talk to, insert name there, Liam Cohn. But they can't talk to now Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, which is also a tricky situation. Now we'll start to transition to the Bears, right? Mike McCarthy does make a lot of sense in Chicago. I called into Waddle and Sylvie. I listened to Waddle and Sylvie.
Oh, there you go.
Nice. And ESPN 1000 Chicago. I called in yesterday and today on two different coaching things. And mainly because it's just like I like to like throw that take out, see what they think, and then it's like, okay, am I crazy or not? And then I bring it here, right? And my thought first and foremost when Mike McCarthy got fired is I actually was excited, and let me explain why. Because there are now currently 6 openings. I think with the Patriots opening gone, the Bears are the best or the second best opening. You could argue, I think, Jacksonville because Trevor Lawrence, but the Bears, I think, are the best or the second best opening for like a win now. I want to come in and make my stamp. You've got a guy and you've got an opening, and I want to come in and like show you that I can do this and win with that guy, right? If you don't want a guy and you want to start fresh with your own thing, then yeah, the Jets or the
Vegas.
Raiders or whatever. Yeah, I mean those, but as far as the main priorities you think with an opening, I think the Bears are the best or the second best. So I personally think there are 3 offensive guys, same names I said last week, Ben Johnson, Liam Cohn, and Joe Brady, who I'm really, really, really intrigued by. When you add in the fact that now you add Mike McCarthy's name to the list, who I would put Mike McCarthy in my tiers above Brian Flores. I'd put him above Pete Carroll. I would put him above Anthony Weaver. I'd put him above any defensive coach. And I would put him slightly above just as far as overall, will he be good at the job? Any of the college coaches as well, because I have the proven track record with Mike. Now, signing up to Mike McCarthy is a lot like signing Kirk Cousins in his prime to a 4-year deal. You kind of know what you're signing up for. His track record is that when he won the Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, he was in the middle of his tenure. He'd already been the head coach for a couple of years because remember, he had Brett Favre too. and was part of the transition from Favre to Rodgers. Brought a lot of stability to that organization in Green Bay. But when he won the Super Bowl, they had their best defense ever. And so Mike McCarthy is an offensive guy who needs help defensively. But I would choose him, like I said, above any of the defensive guys and a lot of the older or other recycled head coaching candidates. Now, I would still put him below those three offensive guys I listed. But again, my goal as a Bears fan right now is to get someone who can start showing that my young quarterback is going to be my quarterback for the next 10 years. I don't need Mike McCarthy to be my coach for the next 10 years. That's why I want a Ben Johnson, right? Because I want them to just
build the foundation.
I want to pair him with a guy who could be with him for 10 years. But if Mike McCarthy can come in and after 3 years, after 4 years, let's say he gets a 4-year deal. By year 2, we make the playoffs. Year 3, we make the playoffs. Year 4, it's kind of a funky year, and we lose in trying to make the playoffs. Then I can say, and over that time, Caleb Williams finally throws for 4,000 yards and is really putting up numbers that Dak was putting up. Then I can say to myself, well, fuck, we got the guy, and now it's a winning culture. Fire Mike McCarthy's ass and go get me the next guy who can then elevate, right? I still got Caleb Williams probably re-signed in his prime, but now we're already in a better situation, right? So I can sell myself on that. I don't have to sell myself that Mike McCarthy's going to be my coach for the next 10 to 15 years. Now, if he wins a Super Bowl or if he leads you, and I think Mike McCarthy in Chicago has a better chance of succeeding than Mike McCarthy in Dallas. And I know that's crazy, but look who's just as dysfunctional as Chicago the last 30 years, Dallas. And at least in Chicago, Mike McCarthy doesn't have to worry about his owner going on radio and saying crazy things. And he has a real GM whose only job is to be a GM. He has a real president whose only job is to be a president. And he has an owner who will only get involved if every 4 years the fan starts chanting "sell the team." So it's not there's a lot less dysfunction
totally
for Mike
dynamic,
McCarthy.
yeah.
So
absolutely.
I don't want this to be seen as Mark is advocating for Mike McCarthy, but I do want it to be seen as Mark is advocating for Mike McCarthy over Brian Flores, over Anthony Weaver, over Aaron Glenn, and over some fringe candidates like we talked about Mike Kafka, probably over Cliff Kingsbury, certainly over the random Iowa State college coach, certainly over, Ron Rivera and some other names that have been interviewed, Pete Carroll. But I still would rather them swing for the fence with Brady, Cohen, or Johnson. If you don't get one of those guys, and Mike McCarthy's your head coach, it's not a bad thing. I think Mike McCarthy will be the head coach of either the Chicago Bears or the New Orleans Saints. He's linked to those two jobs already. I think he makes a ton of sense for both those franchises. I hope the Chicago Bears have the spine and the backbone to be okay with losing Mike McCarthy because the Saints offer him right now. And it's and saying, hey, listen, we're going to get Ben Johnson in this building. So we might have to wait till after the Super Bowl. I hope they have the spine to do that. And I hope they don't panic and go, oh, no, we're going to lose out on Mike. So just sign him. Because if you sign him and rush him, and then you do miss out on a Ben Johnson to even get him in your building, Joe Brady, get him in your building and talk to those guys and really see what their plans could be for your young quarterback, then you did not do your due diligence as a coaching search. This isn't Mike Tomlin, and you're going to miss out on Mike Tomlin if you don't sign him right now. It's Mike McCarthy. It's a solid coach. So I know that's a lot, but I do think there's a real world in which the next time we're talking, Mike McCarthy's the head coach of the Bears. That's a real thing because that's how this organization works. So I want it known before we get to that point. I will be very disappointed if they don't wait and do their due diligence on the young guys. I won't be tragically disappointed if Mike McCarthy's my next head coach.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would share a lot of that because he's a solid head coach. He's a program builder. He can, get that foundation solidified for the next head coaching search that comes down the road. I agree with you there. Well, we've got a lot to get to, Mark, here with the wild card round. We'll start with that. We'll go into our recap of all of those games, give our commentary, and then we'll look ahead at the end of the show towards these divisional round matchups. So let's dive into wild card round. And with that, we will go into the games in order of which they were played this past weekend, starting with the Texans playing host to the Los Angeles Chargers.
We
What
got
a
this one wrong.
brutal. Oh, what's that?
We got
this
one
went wrong. Okay, yeah. It certainly did. We both picked the Chargers to win this game and felt pretty comfortable with that, but it is the Houston Texans coming out on top 32-12. An absolute drubbing of Los Angeles, and Justin Herbert playing terribly, but not getting any help from his teammates at that. 4 interceptions.
I lost you. You're frozen on my end. If you're talking to me, you're frozen on my end.
Yeah, you're good. I dropped out for a second, but where did everything go so wrong for this team?
So let me just start with this. I went 4-2 on Wild Card Weekend. What was your record? What did you end up? This was one of my 2 losses.
I went 3-3 then because I had the Chargers winning, so I lost that one. I had the Vikings winning. I lost that one, and I had the Bucks winning. I lost that.
So I had the Rams winning that one. I had the Bucks winning. So those were my 2. The Chargers and the Bucks are my 2 losses. Dan, I will say this: when I was watching this game, it was so fascinating. If you go back to the first quarter and a half, if you look at the game flow, the Houston holding them to those 2 field goals, and then they get that first turnover. This game should have been 21-0 Los Angeles. They were dominating in this game for the first quarter and a half, like physically moving the ball. The Chargers defense was keeping them alive in this game. And you're thinking to yourself, even midway through the second quarter, I'm like, the Chargers are going to be fine. This was the right pick. It's a slow start. They should probably be up at least 14-0. It's 6-0, but they're going to be fine. And then CJ Stroud moves to his right off of that fumble and then picks it up and throws an insane pass across his body. And the Houston Texans go on a 90-something yard drive to score a touchdown. And all of a sudden, at halftime, the Texans have the lead. And it's like, this game just was never the same. And really what it was, and I think it was the theme of the weekend, the Texans punched the Chargers in the mouth in that moment. And there was no response. And it's the same thing we'll talk about with your Steelers. It's the same thing we'll talk about with the Packers. I think it's the same thing that we'll talk about slightly with Denver as well. Like this game and the Denver game looked very similar. Where it's kind of like, oh, this is kind of a fun, layered back and forth. And then one team late in the second, midway through the second quarter, decided, fuck this. This is why are we toying with this? Let's punch them in the mouth. And that's what Buffalo did. That's what Houston did. And the Chargers had no response. Listen, the Chargers were on the outside of the playoffs looking in 5 weeks ago. The Chargers had a really successful first season under Jim Harbaugh. What did we learn from the Chargers in this game? Yeah, Justin Herbert threw more interceptions in one playoff game than he did all season long. And I think the thing that we take from that is, if you look at Quentin Johnson, he's not good enough. He's probably should be like a rotational guy, not even like a 3. They need to go get a number 1 wide receiver to pair with Ladd McConkey. They probably need to improve their tight end. And then they need to, I think, go get Ashton Genty in the first round and say, if we're going to be a power run team and we're going to commit this way, we need a stud. We need a Saquon Barkley. We need a Derrick Henry. Look at the teams that are moving on. So I'm not worried about the Chargers. It was a bad loss. People are like crucifying Justin Herbert. I'm not crucifying Justin Herbert. This was the first year of a rebuild, and they made it to the playoffs and were a 12-win team. They underperformed in this game, but I'm not going to sit here and write the obituary for the Chargers and Justin Herbert. For the Houston Texans, what a surprise. What a shock. And Dan, I will say this about Houston. I didn't see this coming, but here's 2 years in a row now. DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud have won a playoff game, and kudos to them. I think it ends next weekend. We'll talk about the preview coming on up, but I will say I mean, how can you not, if you're a Houston Texans fan, this win saved that whole season. This, we talked about it last week. The Texans were just kind of a meh. We never mentioned the Texans all year long. You win a game, and look now where you are. This is now considered a successful season. And if you can put up a really good fight against Kansas City, you've established that you're in that upper echelon tier. There's the same 4 teams that played on divisional round in the AFC last year are playing in the divisional round this year. They're the 4 best teams in the AFC right now. Houston is one of those teams, even though their regular season didn't turn out the way we thought it would when we started the season.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Justin Herbert needs to, wear some of this because I thought 2 of those picks, a lot of people were talking about the Will Dissly one, which was obvious, but I also thought the one to Ladd McConkey, Ladd should have caught that. I mean, yes, it was high, but it went through his hands. Like you got to make those catches. So I think he that really could have been 2 interception game for Justin Herbert, but you can't let things compound.
Yeah, it fell apart. If you're talking on my end, I can't hear you. I lost you. And now I have no idea if I'm just talking over you or if the chat is looking at me like, say something, you big dumb idiot wearing all blue. How did I end up wearing all blue? I don't know. I don't know how I ended up wearing all blue. Probably because bear down. That's why.
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay. So look in the private chat. I'll try and chat
I'm in
there.
I'm in the private chat. I don't see anything from you.
No, I haven't. I didn't put anything, but I will now because
cool.
I'm apparently my network is completely unreliable. So we'll try and
Spectrum
get through this and hopefully, yeah. Unfortunately, and they are the only player in town, so they are the only option to work with.
The Monopoly guy. Spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I just think.
We're never going to get your thoughts on the Houston Texans versus the Los Angeles Chargers, are we?
Hear me?
I got you now.
Okay, you got me. Okay, well, it's like brutal. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get this working sooner rather than later because I've got some spicy words.
I know we got to talk about your Steelers.
Yeah, most definitely. But yeah, no, I mean, I didn't have too much more to say other than I think the future's bright, but I also think we need to start tempering expectations or at least tempering crowning Justin Herbert as that S tier quarterback with those other. Just hasn't earned it yet. If Lamar Jackson can get fairly lambasted for going 2-4 in the playoffs, Justin Herbert hasn't won a playoff game yet.
Yeah, he's 0-2 now. He's 0-2, and they're a colossal collapse and a 4 interception game. I think I'm with you. I think my biggest thought on the Chargers is this off season now is extremely important, and it doesn't have to be a flashy off season. They don't need to go get Stephon Diggs or whatever, like Houston did. Like, I don't need a diva wide receiver. But if you tell me that they find a way to get T. Higgins and then also draft a stud running back, then I'm looking at the Chargers in a very positive light. We'll talk more about Houston when we preview the Houston Chiefs game, because again, kudos to them. I think everyone and their mom picked the Chargers. And I don't know. I don't know a national person or someone I follow who is high on Houston. They showed up, and again, they hit the Chargers in the mouth in that second quarter, and their defensive line took over that game. And it was and CJ Stroud had the drive, and that's all they needed.
I was going to say, I mean, defensively, it was very impressive because they had not performed terribly well throughout much of the season. And then obviously they really hit a skid there towards the end of the year as a team in general. So for them to get up for this game and win it was impressive. I still, I have a lot of reservations about Houston. I think they are, their ceiling is currently very capped as well. I don't see them as a Super Bowl team, contending team anytime soon. If they win this week, That will kind of really, really make
Shock
things
the
very
world.
interesting and be shocking. But I think there are 5 realistic Super Bowl teams even coming into this year, and then maybe a couple that wouldn't be the most shocking. I don't consider Houston being in that group just yet, but
All right.
a couple more years, we'll see. I think D'Amico Ryans has earned a lot of respect already, and so has CJ Stroud. So let's get to the next game then, the Saturday night game between the Ravens and the to say about the game itself other than Baltimore absolutely exerted their will, their dominance. They took the manhood from Pittsburgh in every possible way. 300 yards rushing. They had a drive that was 13 straight runs
That was
down their
epic. The
throats.
third drive of the game, and the game was over. The game was over.
They had a 96-yard drive, I believe a 92-yard drive, and an 86-yard drive, something like that in this game. Obviously, if you're giving up those types of drives, you're not going to win football.
You're not.
Lauded this defense was. I cut out for a moment there?
Just a second there. Yeah.
For how lauded this defense is and was, I think that was the most shocking element for a lot of people. Given that they just got completely dog walked for the entire 60 minutes and a brief glimmer of life in the third quarter where the offense finally decided to come up and play. But I have a lot of thoughts about what this means for the team moving forward, what this means for Mike Tomlin, where I stand, like officially, like now going to put my flag down and plant that in terms of my thoughts. But I'll let you kind of give your thoughts on the game first, and then we'll kind of get to what this means moving forward. But
totally.
Overall, the Ravens were absolutely the better team. They are a Super Bowl caliber team in this game. We both picked them to win for a reason. And I think, man, it's going to be really tough to beat this group if they can continue to have the dominance from Derrick Henry, and if they continue to play well defensively, but have Lamar be Lamar's most.
Yeah, I was so disappointed in the effort from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a lot of the discourse, and you try to figure out and you sift through, right? And this is why we love doing this, is because you get to argue what's right and what's wrong. And I think there's a lot of truth to both. Did the defense fail, or was the defense carrying this team all year? They're gassed. They're in the playoffs, and they begging the offense to put a 10-play drive together and show some life. And the first 2 series are punt, 3 and out, and then I think like a 6-play and out. And by that time, you're down 14-0. And when you're on the road and you're playing Lamar Jackson, you've got to keep him off the field. And you don't just do that with your defense. You do that with your offense staying on the field and your offense putting drives together. And Pittsburgh could not do that at all. And even in the scoring drive they had, it was they finally went over the top and hit a couple big plays. It wasn't, a 9-minute, 14-play, just grind out drive, which they needed early in this game, and they didn't get it. And I think what was shocking for me is, we had said it last week, the best bet is Pittsburgh plus the points, because Mike Tomlin's going to get his guys up. The guys weren't up. TJ Watt wasn't up. There was no life from the stars when you needed them to be stars. Maybe it's Russ. I don't know. But I'll say this for Baltimore. They are an incredibly unique team. And if they can play with that intensity and that game plan, then I don't think there's a team that can beat them, because they can run the ball like no one else in the league right now. The Lions could run the ball like that when they had Montgomery and Gibbs, where it's like one after the other. But Lamar Jackson and Henry together, it's so special. And they needed this game for their confidence, especially after the AFC title game last year when they didn't run the ball enough. This was like the reminder of like, hey, this is what we need to do. It's December football. It's January football. Like, let's go. Credit to the game plan from Monken. Credit to the Baltimore Ravens defense as well for coming out and not letting the Steelers run the ball at all. I mean, the Steelers could not physically run the football at all. Look at the numbers.
29
If you watch
yards.
the game, it's embarrassingly bad. And so definitely the Ravens won this game, but I would also argue that the Steelers did not show up. They didn't. This was supposed to be the heavyweight match of the weekend. There was the primetime game, and the Steelers, it's like they cashed their check. It's like the Jake Paul Logan Paul, Tyson fight. And I'm just cashing my check and we're going home.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like.
I absolutely, that's so funny that you bring that up because I wrote that down. I had to put my thoughts to paper for this one because I had
Can I just say before you go off on the rant?
On. Yes.
You're more likely to freeze if you physically are moving more. I'm just giving you that note.
Okay, well, that's going to be tough with an animated discussion coming up.
I'm just giving to challenge you.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, no, and definitely call it out if I do end up going out. And
I have some questions for you after your rant. I'm going to see if you answer them throughout your rant, and then I may kind of poke you and prod you at a couple things.
Sure. No, absolutely. Well, I guess I'll start this whole thing with, and I agree with everything you said about the game itself. I'll start this by addressing the elephant in the room and the low-hanging fruit at the same time. I have been, and I think you would agree with this, I would consider myself a Tomlin defender because there have been calls to fire Tomlin for the last 6 years, right? Like there's always calls to fire your head coach, but they've grown louder and louder, and I've always been the defender of it, right? I have officially reached the point where I'm planting the flag and willing to say I am advocating for the separation to commence. Whether that's firing, whether it's a mutual agreement to seek other opportunities, it's time for the Pittsburgh Steelers to move in a different direction. It's time for Mike Tomlin to undoubtedly be a great coach somewhere else. It has nothing to do with his qualities as a head coach in this league. He is qualified to be a really good head coach in this league. But a lot of times, as in with most things in life, things require a new chapter. And it's run its course in Pittsburgh. And it's hard when you have a head coach whose qualities are the hardest to measure, which is his leadership and his motivation, right? Those aren't as easy to measure as schematics and specific numbers that you put down on the sheet. And so that's probably what's kept him afloat in this type of conversation for all of these years is that, well, at the end of the day, people want to play for him. I agree with that. I think that's great. And I'm starting this rant off with these glowing declarations because I think he deserves the praise from the fan base. But also to make sure to set it up that everything that comes after this shouldn't, be outdone with, my overall respect I have for like the head coach and for how much I appreciate the great years that he's given. All of that being said, it's time to split. And Tomlin said something today in his press conference, end of season press conference, that I find incredibly ironic and just poetic. He said, that he tells the team and they throw it back at him a lot jokingly in his phrase that there's an expiration on adjusting and adapting. And he said it in the tone of telling the team that there needs to be urgency in everything. And there's an expiration on how much you can adjust and adapt. And I find that hilarious because this is a team that routinely starts games slow, not just slow, they don't even crawl to begin games in the National Football League. We're talking about more than this season going into last season with Matt Canada. They haven't scored a first drive touchdown, excuse me. We're talking about a team that led by Mike Tomlin that has gone 8 straight years without a playoff win, 0-6 over that stretch. And they have been outscored, Mark, 73-0 in the first quarter of every single one of those games.
Yep,
And this
that's
is a
bad.
man who every week, and I know this is a heavy term, he gaslights people all the time in his press conferences. And he'll tell you that what your eyes are seeing is not really what it is. And he'll constantly deflect any questions about slow starts and saying, we are not defined by how we start. We're always defined by how we finish. And games aren't won in the first quarter, and they're not determined by what happens in the first quarter. Well, you know what? They may not be determined in the first quarter, but they certainly can be lost in the first quarter. And
You
when you
lost the
set
game in the
yourself
first
up,
quarter. You lost this playoff game in the first
absolutely,
quarter.
they have every one of these playoff games in recent memory. They were down 21-0 against the Browns a few years back, led by Baker Mayfield. You can't win important games in this league when you're constantly putting yourself in a position to have to come back and make up lost ground. And not only having to do that, but setting yourself up to have to do that with you're limiting the amount of time you have. You're limiting the amount of rope you have to work with. And so this is a team that adjusts really well after the first half. It's a team that can come out well in the third quarter of football games and can close out fourth quarter when they're playing inferior opponents. But this is a team that, frankly, under Mike Tomlin's reign over the last decade, has not been able to beat the elite of the elite and contend consistently. Yes, you could sprinkle a win here and there against, a Buffalo or whatever, but we're talking about consistent wins. And outside of their division, yes, they can beat a really good Ravens team. That's what he'll hang his hat on. But they're not beating great teams that are outside of the division almost ever. And those are the biggest things that really, really irk me when it comes to how the Pittsburgh Steelers play football. You mentioned Mike Tyson. I think this is like a perfect analogy. The Steelers of the last 8 seasons have been Mike Tyson walking into that fight with Jake Paul. Or decorated legend, well past their prime, battling even the bottom rung of the current generation.
You give him a chance. You think to yourself, you convinced that if he lands a right hook, they can win.
They can get there, and they've got the aura, the spunk behind them that maybe they can win. This is a team, Mark, that's lost to Blake Bortles. It gave up 45 points.
It broke
to
them.
Blake Bortles and company.
Ever since that loss, it broke them. They haven't won a playoff game.
Yeah, they lost to Baker. Yes, they've lost to the Buffaloes, the Ravens, the Chiefs, but they've also lost to those guys. Yeah. They don't. So if they're going to lose to that, they don't have a shot against Mahomes, Allen, or Lamar. Great defenses nowadays are usually accompanied by really good, at minimum, to great offenses as well. And the Pittsburgh Steelers mindset under Mike Tomlin has always been, we'll win with our defense, and we'll figure it out on offense. It just doesn't cut it anymore. No. To me, Mark, you can patchwork this all you want. In my humble opinion, the Pittsburgh Steelers will not be a champion again while Mike Tomlin is the head coach of this team, unless a Hall of Fame quarterback is thrust into their lap. And that's a problem because you shouldn't need everything to pan out perfectly. Yes, you need a really good quarterback to win in this league. There's no question about that. I get that. But when you're one of the highest paid coaches in all of sports, you're held to a higher standard. When you're the defensive head coach who's got his handprint all over this defense, and you go down 73-0 against your 6 playoff games in a row, your highest paid defense in the NFL hasn't been worth shit when it matters most. They play great at the beginning of seasons, and then they completely collapse when they have to come up against great offenses. And that's because at the end of the day, it's all about hoorah and tradition and philosophy versus scheme. Yeah. Because great players still need a great scheme to work as a unit. He just has guys that can play great collectively. I'm going to say a couple other things here, Mark, and then I'll turn it to you for your reaction. Another thing, assistant coaches. We've talked about this for years. He has routinely had poor assistant coaches, and they've had the smallest staff in the league. That's a problem, and they got slight tweaks to it last year, and they'll probably do another slight tweak this year get a new defensive coordinator. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not going to matter because Tomlin won't give up the reins. This eventually has to go on Art Rooney because we can only blame Mike Tomlin so long until you say, hey, Art, you're tolerating all of this. You're letting this happen. They let this happen when they gave Mike Tomlin a 3-year extension last year before he even did what Art Rooney laid out as the need for this team, which was score more points, and we're done with this non-playoff winning stretch. We need to go out and win a playoff game. He said that in the same breath as giving him a 3-year extension. That makes no sense. They should have let him right out this year and then reevaluated at the end of this year. You know what's most damning about this playoff game, Mark? The Ravens went into this one with running 11 personnel. For those listening, that's one running back, one tight end set. Just 11% of the time in this game. They came out and said, we are going to put our big bodies out there.
Yep.
6 offensive linemen. We're going to have 3 tight ends, and we're just going to pound the rock. And how did the Steelers respond? How did Mike Tomlin, in all of his brilliance, respond to this? They ran nickel with 5 defensive backs, 33 plays in this game, and gave up a 9.5 yards per play. And they did that in the first 5 plays and said, let's do 30 more of that. We're going to roll it out there. You know what that is? It's hubris. It's arrogance. It's stubbornness from a head coach who says, we are going to play how I want us to play, regardless of what the other team is doing, regardless of whether or not it's working. That's why we saw Najee Harris running the ball consistently when Jaylen Warren has been the better player at the position. That's why we saw Cam Sutton, despite being on the lam for beating up his girlfriend, they sign him and say, we're going to play him and start him, even though the players were talking about how there were communication issues and how Cam Sutton was the elephant in the room of this defense. We're going to play him over Beanie Bishop, who was an undrafted free agent that has 5 picks this year. Beanie didn't even play, I think, more than 5 snaps all this past game. That is a head coach who is more about being loyal to his guys and being right than he is ultimately about winning. If you really want to say, I know that Mike Tomlin wants to win football games, but I think winning his way is more important than winning. And we are at the point in time where that has become too much. There needs to be more scheme with this team. There needs to be an emphasis on that. And I will end this by saying none of that will happen. None of the change will happen.
Just like the Bears aren't going to sell the team. It's not happening.
Yeah, they already came out a day after the loss and said, Mike Tomlin's our guy. They were sure they wanted to make sure that Tomlin didn't even have to sweat an ounce for his job. That's all you need to know about where this team is going. Mike Tomlin will make a great head coach elsewhere. I think he'd be a great fit for your Bears, and I think you guys and the Bears would rightfully be ecstatic to have him as a head coach. And that is all well and fair. But there are coaches meant for certain times and places. The Bears need a foundation builder. They need a culture setter. They need someone to steady the ship from sinking. Mike Tomlin's that guy.
Need that too.
The Steelers' ship hasn't sunk, but it also hasn't gone anywhere. It is bobbing and waiting in the water, and that's what it will continue to do. He can go rebuild a ship elsewhere. This ship doesn't need to be rebuilt. It needs to get rid of its anchor. And that's where we are with the Pittsburgh Steelers of today. And that's why I'm advocating for Mike Tomlin to be gone from the Pittsburgh Steelers for a total reset. And I say that knowing that it could blow up and they could have a terrible head coach as the next head coach. But hopefully that will at least yield a high draft pick where they can get a quarterback of the future and then their next head coach when the time is right. But
it's a tough situation to be in if you're the Rooney family. Listen, the Rooneys, the Maras, the McCaskies, formerly the Hallises, like you're talking about football royalty. You're talking about the founding families of football. And when you look at the Giants, the Steelers, the Bears, if you're the Steelers and you're the Rooney family, you're probably looking in New York and into Chicago going, dude, they're chanting sell the team in the stadiums. We never get chance of sell the team. The worst
Yep.
we get is Mike Tomlin didn't win a playoff game. And they're probably all looking at each other going, do you want to go and do a head coaching search? Do you want to go and do a head coaching search? I don't want to fucking do a head coaching search. And because look what happens when the Bears do a head coaching search. It's a nightmare. And the whole media, you got the national media, the local media, you got guys like us ripping the Bears apart for their coaching search because it's a dumb coaching search. You're interviewing a million dudes. You might walk away with Mike McCarthy without ever even getting Vrabel and Ben Johnson in your building. And I think the Rooneys are slightly scared of that as well. Like they're terrified of that because when they actually have to do their job, then Grace is there. That's a supportive wife right there.
She's on board. She's on board.
That's the support. She just wants her husband to stop screaming at night terrors. She wants to be able to sleep at night. And so, Dan, I don't disagree with anything you said there. And I think the biggest point that you're hitting in my like outside view of looking into the Steelers, and you obviously with following it with so much more intensity, is that you nailed it with the assistant coaching. Andy Reid has lost guys to be head coaches. Now, did they be the most successful people in the world? Not necessarily. I mean, Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl.
Some had success. Yeah, some had success.
Matt Nagy's gone on. Ron Rivera. I mean, there's other people there.
But they even got jobs. They at least got jobs.
Mike Tomlin, it's like he surrounds himself with these
yes,
weird. We were calling for Matt Cannon to be fired for 3 years almost. It felt like, and a
lot of the local media reporting is that it wasn't even Tomlin's decision, despite him claiming responsibility. It was Art Rooney saying you have to fire him.
And here's the thing. And here's the thing. And if I was Art Rooney, this is what I would push. What I would push is you're going to hire someone who has worked with Sean McVay. Like, get me one of those guys, because let's just see what that looks like. Like, if I'm Art Rooney saying
they have in the building, offensive guys, but they got a new quarterbacks coach. They got the quarterbacks coach from LA. They got a wide receivers coach.
And just say, hey, do you know how to run that system? Because look at what those teams do, dominating running the football. And again, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you look across at the Baltimore Ravens. I just kept saying to myself, I was like, fuck. If I'm a Steelers fan right now, I'm looking at the Ravens going, that should be us. We're the same thing. We should dominate with a run game, have a quarterback who can then just easily dice up a defense because they're so worried about us running the ball down their throat. And then we just pin our ears back on defense and we have the steel curtain and we rush the passer. And you're not offensively capable. A good defense in the modern NFL in the 2020s, a good defense is only a good defense because you have an offense that can get first downs. It doesn't have to be an offense that scores.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an offense that scores, but it has to be an offense that instills confidence in the defense and can get first downs to keep them fresh. If you have that, your defense will be better. You will have a good defense. Look at the Broncos. Why were the Broncos able to lead the leagues in sack this year? Because in a lot of ways, they found confidence finally in their offense where it's like, hey, these guys are staying on the field and we're getting a lead.
And you put pressure on the other. When you score points, you put pressure on the other team. They have to
look at the Rams.
More.
We'll talk about the Rams here in a second. That's exactly what they did. They're like, fuck, did you just see what our offense did? They took the ball down 7 plays, 70 yards, touchdown. We're up 7-0. Pin them back, boys. And then they drafted the right guys, were young guys. They coached up, well. So
and that's the problem is like the Steelers are always playing checkers. Our guys versus your guys. They're never playing
scheme.
They're never thinking about what the other team is doing and how to exploit it. They're just saying, you better stop Najee and go ahead and try. And then they do, and it's successful. And it says,
and then they're like,
we'll get it on the next drive. We'll get it on the like.
They manned us today.
It's mind-numbing, man. Like, and I get it. Like, a lot of fans are gonna be like, oh wow, like boo-hoo, you guys are in the playoffs every year, like cry me a river. I get it. I get that. But it is really frustrating when you see stuff that as an outsider, you're like, I don't know. I don't know half the shit that Mike Tomlin's forgot about football. And yet I can see some of these things so clearly, and so can so many other people.
Well, and it's because we watch
insulate yourself.
If you only watch Pittsburgh Steelers football, like if that's the only games you watch are Steelers games, you probably don't see it as much. But when you watch the NFL and like we watch what the Rams just did on Monday night, and then you watch the Steelers, you go, that's a different game. Like, what are
Yeah,
they
and the
doing?
Rams defense, probably one of the lowest payroll
Oh yeah,
units
they're
in
one
the
of the
league,
youngest and lowest
and they're
payroll
crushing it. And you have the highest paid defense in the league that you
with
choose
a
to run
defensive head coach, and the
nickel
Rams
against.
have an offensive head coach.
Yeah.
And
It's
so,
it's just it's just not working, man.
and
Like
that's, I
it
mean,
can't work.
it's obvious for me too, because as a Bears fan, I live in that as well, right? Like, I watch my team and then I watch a good team and I go, we're playing different sports. Like, it's a different sport. So it was easy for me to agree with you. Again, if you're
Yeah.
new to the podcast and you're saying Dan's a whiny baby, let us remind you, it took 10 years. It's
Yeah,
you've
to get to
been
this point.
you've
Yeah.
been no, I love winning the Steelers. We're gonna win this year. This could be our year. It took 10 years of losing in the first round of the playoffs until Dan's finally like, all right, I'm done with my coach. I think most fan bases of teams like the Bears, the Jets, the Jaguars, the Raiders, I would sign up for 10 years of success until I'm annoyed and then wanting to fire my coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I think it's fair. The thing I would do if I was the Roonies or if I was a Steelers fan, I would push them on, go out and make another change at offensive coordinator, and go out and go get a quarterback who you feel like is in their prime. Like, go get Sam Darnold, or go get aggressive in the draft and be the Steelers, be the team that trades up to the number 2 pick. You know what I
Right,
mean?
yeah.
And just say, fuck it, we got to
Well, I
do
think
this.
everything needs to be on the table.
Yeah.
I think they need to consider trading Minka, trading TJ.
TJ.
Like, I think some of these things need to be on the
Oh yeah.
table,
We'll
for
see what
them
they
to
do.
actually move the needle to where they need to go. Yeah, and like I said, a lot of these, I'm not naive. These will not happen. But some of these coordinator moves will happen. Some of these assistant coach things will happen. So I
Yeah.
think the minimal thing I need the Roonies to do to Tomlin
Keep
is
the
make him
pressure.
understand the pressure he's under, and also have him, like you said, get a especially defensive coordinator as well. Like, they need new defensive coordinator, I believe. And let that defensive coordinator do his job.
Yeah, like
Let
what
the
Brian
offensive
Flores did.
coordinator. I think I like Arthur Smith. I think he deserves another run at it. Let him do his job. Don't tell him he needs to put Najee out there. Don't tell him he needs to have this personnel. They'll have to get rid of their O-line coach too. Enough's enough. The O-line was not progressing the way it needed to, and they have talent. So those are the minimal things that I'll look for, and I'll be right back here next season, hoping for the best, cheering on the team, being frustrated as hell. But talk is cheap, man, and I'm
Yeah.
sick of hearing Tomlin talk about the same stuff. It's the problem is philosophy. It's the philosophy that this team needs a new philosophy, and
Yeah.
Tomlin it's just not how he's wired. He has
And
his philosophy, and he can take that to another team, and that works to build it, but it doesn't work for what this team needs right now. This team needs offensive ingenuity, innovation. This team needs a coach that will go for it on 4th and inches when you're down 7-0 in a playoff game against the Baltimore Ravens. They punted the ball, Mark, and that ensued the 96-yard drive.
Yeah. Well, he
that they
thinks
went
I'm going to
13
stop
straight
him with my
runs.
defense. Look what I did. He pinned him to the 4. In his mind, he was right. He just didn't make the stop, and that's also dangerous.
Yeah,
That's
but you
and,
weren't. It wasn't working
Yeah.
up to that point, and
I
it's
know.
like you got to have some stones sometimes.
I know. Well, and for all the Ravens fans who are listening to this, going like, "Are you going to talk about the Ravens?" We're going to preview the games coming up here in a bit. So the Ravens are going to get their flowers.
Yeah,
and they're going to be talked about here in a little.
And that was a lot.
Sure.
I know I spent a lot on the Ravens Steelers. I haven't had my
No.
Steelers moment this year. So
Listen,
that's,
you lost 5 in a row to
they
end the
needed it.
season. You lost 5 in a row to end the season.
Brutal.
6 weeks ago, it was legitimate. The Steelers still had a chance of the 1 seed, and they're out in the first round in embarrassing fashion. And we're not going to have as much of a chance to talk about them because, unlike the Bears, like, they're not going to hire a coach. Like, they're now set pat, right? It's basically like till free agency in the draft, we wait to see what the Steelers do.
And they're drafting 21st, where they're not going to be talking about them in terms of who's the top 10 picks.
No.
Like, they're not going to be in that conversation.
So we'll have to wait and see what that transpires to.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to the Bills Broncos. Obviously started a lot better for Denver. That kind of the way that you would hope if you were Denver. I thought they didn't pivot quick enough. I thought they leaned into the run too much. They were a little stubborn in that respect. Sean Payton was. I thought it's like, hey man, let Bo do his thing a little bit, because this is going to turn into a shootout pretty quick, and it did eventually get that way and got out of hand, and the Bills were able to take care of business. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it wasn't a surprise. It's still a win for Denver overall this season. They got their quarterback. Looks like things are working with that coaching staff, and so there's a lot to be proud of. But yeah, it did get carried away at a certain point, and Buffalo kind of ran with it.
You know, the AFC West and the NFC North, they combined for 6 of the 14 playoff teams. And when you think about what happened, 4 of them are now gone, right? Only the 1 seeds remain. And when you look at the Broncos, just like I said with the Chargers, the arrow is pointed still very up. They had the most dead cap space, and they competed for a half against a Bills team that's very capable of winning the Super Bowl, and a quarterback in Josh Allen who's probably going to win the MVP or second in place in the MVP. I will say this. I agree with you. I think there was some coaching scared, some too conservative from Sean Payton. Now, I was hoping he'd be like on his Sean Payton kind of fuck shit where it's like, we got to do the fuck shit to win this game. And again, credit to them. They were in the game for a quarter and a half, like the Chargers. And you thought, oh my God, we're kind of hanging. And then the talent of a Buffalo, the talent of a Houston with your quarterback and your playmakers, it became too much. It's an avalanche. When you look at Buffalo too, they were able to rush the passer. Their defense has some teeth in it. And playing at home, and again, now they get the Ravens at home. I think that's a huge, huge factor for the game. I will say for Josh Allen, there's a couple different players in the NFL, and there's only like probably 10 of them I can list on your hand, and we saw a good amount of them this weekend. Where when you watch them, you say to yourself, "That's a Hall of Famer." That's what a Hall of Famer looks like. That's what a Hall of Famer does. That's what makes this person so different, so unique, so special.
Yep.
When you watch Saquon Barkley, we'll talk about it in a second. When you watch Derrick Henry, we just talked about it. When you watch Lamar, you're like, that's a Hall of Famer. Like, that guy is doing things that my guy has no chance. I watched DeAndre Swift carry the ball all season long. And then you watch Saquon Barkley carry the ball in the playoff game. You go, that's a different game. Like, that's a different world. And DeAndre Swift's a talented NFL player. But when you see a Hall of Famer talent, it jumps off the screen.
You realize the disparity, yeah.
And credit to Josh Allen for, again, I think you could argue the people with the 2 most pressure on him in the playoffs this year were Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Both of them came out and just had really, really, really good performances with great moments. And you say to yourself, you get that first one out of the way, and now that takes a little bit of that pressure off, and it's setting itself up for a great game. Denver should be excited. I was the most wrong on Denver. Now, I think there could be a real sophomore slump incoming. I think that Sean Payton, when you watch Bo Nix, right, it already feels like a lot like I'm watching Dak Prescott, right? Where it's like they're scheming him to be successful.
Yeah, there are limitations.
And when you look at him, he's mobile enough now. Well, he's still young. Remember when Dak was mobile when he was young? It was different. Dak can't move at all now. The injuries have mounted up. So you're in this window with Bo Nix where while he's on his rookie contract, Sean Payton's job this offseason is to add wrinkles, to make changes, because if you just go with the same playbook and you give defensive coordinators a year to digest that, they're not going to be as successful. You need to keep winning with scheme, and you need to keep winning with that. And then hopefully you can shed some cap money. You can get him another big playmaker. You can solidify like the running back for this offense. They need their Alvin Kamara, right? They need their star, just gadget guy to do all the things that Sean Payton works in his offense. And they'll be okay. But for them and the Chargers, disappointing ends. But again, I look at both those AFC West teams as like, this is a win. Now we're about to start talking about the NFC North teams that exited early, and I feel the opposite about them, right? Where it's like the AFC West teams, arrow point up. The NFC North teams that exited early,
starting to crumble.
You can see how the arrow, you could argue, be pointing down, and we'll talk about specifically one of those examples coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into it. The Bucks playing host to the Commanders.
Oh, you
Really
want to
good
skip
game.
Eagles? You want to skip Eagles Packers?
Oh yeah, the Eagles was the next game. It's laid out differently on my sheet here, but yeah, we'll do Eagles Packers. Let's go Eagles Packers.
Love this game.
Obviously, yeah,
Loved this game.
most definitely. Pun intended, by the way.
Dude,
Yeah, the Eagles win 22-10. They ran all over the Packers. This was a game, Mark. They won by 12, a playoff game against a coach that had been to multiple NFC championship games, and they didn't even need AJ Brown to do anything. He had 1 catch for 10 yards. Devontae Smith had 4 catches, 55 yards to lead the team. They didn't need anything through the air. They didn't require Jalen Hurts to elevate anything. He went a meager 13 of 21, had a couple touchdowns. That was nice, but this was Saquon and their running game. They ran the ball 34 times for 169 yards, and it was just bully ball throughout this game. So the Eagles, again, I think they are very much like they're like the NFC's version of the Ravens. They really are. Minus, they don't have Lamar, but they are that type of team where they are complete. They have dudes everywhere. They win the line of scrimmage. They're a tough out. They can match up with anybody, really. And it's scary. Meanwhile, look, this is honestly how I felt all season long. I wasn't buying into the Packers for the vast majority of this season. I was like, there's just something about this team that doesn't scare me. And Jordan Love kind of showed us why there are still a lot of question marks with Jordan Love. 3 interceptions in this game, no touchdowns. Not a great day from him. Still believe in Matt LaFleur. He's great, but maybe, just maybe, they don't have their guy in Jordan Love for the very, very, far future.
So let me start with the positives for the Packers, because I think there's plenty. And I think it starts with the fact that they have the youngest roster in the NFL still, which is crazy. That they have 2 years in a row in the playoffs, one with a big playoff win last year and a bad Jordan Love throw away from beating the Niners and playing in a championship game, to this year, which I think they would have been way more competitive in this game, but they were down to their 3rd and 4th string wide receivers. They were decimated with injuries, cluster injuries. I don't think it was necessarily a fair fight on paper. Also, the Eagles have such an incredible roster. Even if the Packers were 100% healthy, the Eagles have a better roster than the Packers. Now, in 2 years from now, when the Packers mature and these guys start entering their prime, you might be able to make the argument this is a Packers team that has a roster that can hang with anyone in the league. Obviously, Matt LaFleur. Also, they were still in this game. It was never the blowout that the Broncos faced, that the Chargers faced, that your Steelers faced. They were still alive in this game. When they put a drive together, they're right back in it. It was never a 3-touchdown game, right? So on the road against the best roster in football, the Packers were in this game. Now, it was ugly. And again, I think they lost the game of the opening kickoff when they fumble it because they literally got just out physicaled on the first play of the game. And then they lost their star guard on that first drive of the game. And it just fell apart from there. But I will say, if you're a Packers fan, you paid Jordan Love big money after a 7-game stretch last year. And Dan, this is an incredible tweet. And I'm going to save this tweet maybe for my life. Including the playoff game. This is including the playoff game. This is Jordan Love's season. On true dropbacks, it's a unique stat, and it measures a quarterback's ability to just throw the ball. So true dropbacks.
In rhythm, yeah.
Meaning, these do not count RPOs. These are not play-action throws. No screen passes. So literally just 3-step, 5-step, 7-step drops and sling it. So no play-action, no RPO. No, the coach is scheming everything, right? Where it's like, dude, you just got to be the guy, and we need you to make the throw. Jordan Love, 57% completion, 15 touchdowns, 15 INTs, and a 77 passer rating. That's well below league average. I mean, he needs a lot of scheming. Now, if I'm going to be myself as a Bears fan, I'm going to say, I don't believe in Jordan Love. Jordan Love doesn't scare me. I mean, the Bears beating the Packers at the end of the season already makes me feel better about my chances against Jordan Love over the next couple of years. Like, I don't see him as the boogeyman like I did Aaron Rodgers. Now, the other side of that coin is the dude's only been playing 2 years of football. He got really beat up this year. He started the season with an injury. He was healthy middle of the season when they went on their run and beat some good teams and won enough games to get into the playoffs. At end of the season, elbow injury, kind of limping into the playoffs with injuries. Not every year you're going to win the Super Bowl. This felt like another Packers year, right? Where it's like they had pieces, but injuries and things fell apart. I don't think they make any major shakeup changes. But he was not good enough in this game. And the crazy thing about the Eagles, and we'll talk about them here more in a second when we preview it, I have some real questions because like we just talked about with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, you see it when you see it. The Eagles, to me, you compare to the Ravens, I think they're a lot more like the Detroit Lions in the sense that, yes, their defense is better than the Lions right now because their personnel's healthier. And again, the Eagles have the best 52-man roster in football.
Yeah.
So that you can't compare them to anyone in that way. But when I wonder what Jalen Hurts' true dropback rating is, I think Jalen Hurts is a very fine player. But what we saw, I think, very much so in the Packers versus the Eagles was two quarterbacks who absolutely are in the top 12, but they're absolutely firmly in the category of like 6 through 12 as far as like the guys you'd want to start your franchise with.
I mean, Hurts might be Dak Prescott. He might be that like that.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like I think Dak's a better pocket passer, but I think Hurts is just he's.
But they both need a run game. They both need a run game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now it's fair to say we know Lamar, we know Allen, we know Burrow, and we know Mahomes are the four guys in this league we know in their prime right now. Because I'd add Stafford into that, but let's talk about guys in their prime that we know can just like they're the guy. Like they don't necessarily to win a Super Bowl. Do they need help? Everyone needs help to win a Super Bowl, but to just be the guy. Those are the four. I definitely think that, yeah, you look at Herbert, you look at Love, you look at Hurts. That next category of guys that are young in their prime that I love a lot about them. I think they deserve to get paid. I think they're above Tua, right? They're above Dak. They're above Brock Purdy in that way. Lawrence right now. They deserve to get paid. You look at Lawrence, you look at Tua, you look at, Dak. I don't think they deserve to get paid what they're being paid. I think they earned their paycheck, right? But also, if in a year from now or 2 years from now, if Jordan Love doesn't have multiple playoff wins, if he's not into the 3-4 win playoff tier, you're going to say it's a wasted contract, and it wasn't a great contract. For Jalen Hurts, he's already been to Super Bowl, so he's got a little bit more leeway, and now he won a playoff game again. So I think it's going to take more for me to say Jalen Hurts was a bad contract. But it certainly felt like when watching that, this is a fun matchup. These are two kind of equal teams. I wish the Packers were healthy. It would have been a better game. But I also can say it's not Lamar versus Allen. These guys are not in that category.
Right. Yeah. No, that's very true. That is very true. All right, let's go to the Bucks and the Commanders. Commanders pulling off a thrilling victory here.
The only upset, the only
on
real
the road.
seed upset.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Jaden Daniels put on the Superman cape and just came through when the team needed him the most. And what impressed me the most about Jaden Daniels was his composure in the pocket as well, because we all know how lethal he is with his legs. But he made an incredible, touchdown throw to Terry McLaurin where he stayed in there when he could have escaped.
Yeah,
and those are those are the small moments that you have to capture because they don't come every often. Teams in this league, defenses in this league will take advantage. They won't make those mistakes as often. So kudos to him. Really good to see that, especially when they just weren't getting it done from a rushing perspective. They're a team that obviously wants to be able to control the clock and run the football, but more often than not this year, they have relied on Jaden Daniels to do things through the air and with his legs. than most rookie quarterbacks would be able to excel with. So I got to give him a ton of credit. I think he deserves Offensive Rookie of the Year for what he's done. They went 12-5 and won a playoff game against a formidable Tampa team that had an offense that really should have played better. Now, Baker went 15 of 18. It's not like Baker was killing them. It's just they weren't possessing the ball long enough, and they weren't getting the necessary defensive stops that they needed. There's just some crucial moments in that game where they just didn't take advantage of their opportunities, and that ended up being the deciding factor of it for them. So, brutal to watch. It's tough for the Bucks because they're already a very old team, and they're getting a little bit older. Like if there was a year to make that run again, it would have been this year. It's going to be tough. They're getting older and older, but I still think that they're the team in the AFC or the NFC South to contend with. Meanwhile, Washington showed a lot for sure. I'm not going to take them next round, but they showed a lot, and there's a ton of promise for the Commanders moving forward.
Baker Mayfield threw for 4,500 yards and 40-plus touchdowns. Why did he only throw the ball 18 times? I like Liam Cohn. I like what he did this year. I don't love that game plan. Now, I want to know, was that the game plan coming from the head coach saying we are going to run the football? We're going to lean on Bucky Irvine, and he's a great young running back, and we're going to try to control this clock and keep the ball out of Jaden's hands. Maybe that was the game plan. But I think when push comes to shove, I look at that box score and I watch the game. I'm like, why did they not push the ball more with Baker? He's the one who got you to this point. He's the one you should have relied on to lead this team, to make the big throws, to be the aggressive guy like he's been all year. They were playing for their lives the last month and a half, and they didn't play for their lives in this game. It's like they were just content. And so I didn't love the game plan. I will say also, about midway through the second quarter, I realized too, shit, this is a bad matchup for Tampa's defense, because Tampa, what they do really well is they have the two best defensive tackles in football. Maybe the Eagles would argue with that, but Vita Vea and what's his name? But they it's killing me now.
Look at Godshaw? Or no, that's on the page.
No, look it up. Oh God, it's gonna kill me when you say it's gonna kill me. But these guys are, these are rogue. These are like cover, block out the sun type dudes. Vita Vea is one of the largest human beings on the planet. And so but the problem is they cannot rush the passer.
Are you talking about Kalijah Cansey or perhaps Logan Hall? Okay.
Cansey. They're the two leading sack leaders for this Tampa team that is a defensive head coach, where they're two defensive tackles with, I think, like 7 each on the season. If the Bucks go out and they add an elite edge rusher, that defense changes, and I think they maybe win that game, because the problem was Jaden Daniels, if you watch that game, he had a comfortable pocket. You're watching some of those pockets, and you're like, dude, fucking, I would kill for Caleb Williams to have that pocket. He'd be dicing up this team if he had that pocket. And then when you add in the fact, like Lamar, who's got a great pocket, that then he could just go, oh, yeah, I'm going to squeak out here. I'm going to extend this play. It's different. It's just really, really different and really, really special. They were the better team on this day. I still think that there's a lot of fool's gold with Washington, but what I give them credit is that Dan Quinn is kind of gone Dan Campbell. They didn't punt this game. They went for it on multiple fourth downs. And when you're saying to yourself, hey, we're just going to be aggressive, we have nothing to lose, they felt like the team that had nothing to lose was more aggressive. And when you're in these situations, the confidence that gives your players when your head coach is emanating that can make the difference. It can make the difference. And you saw a team in Tampa that felt tight, and you saw a team in Washington that felt like, we're going to say fuck it, and if we lose, we lose, but we're going to try to win this game. Tampa tried to not lose that game, it felt like, and Washington tried to win that game. Listen, there's so many people saying the Bears should have drafted Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is fantastic. I'm going to root for him, and I'm happy for the people of Washington. The fans of Washington are what I aspire to be. They got their owner fired. They got a new culture, and everything's clicking for them. That's amazing. And if they start winning Super Bowls, I'll hate them. But for right now, I'm happy for them. A historic franchise like our franchise is finally turned around, and hopefully can be a consistent winner. This is their first playoff win, I think, since 2006. their first. I mean, they broke a lot of history with this win.
Mhm.
So credit to Washington. And for Tampa, I truly think they're an edge rusher away from being right back as the NFC South favorites and right back in this position. Again, what's the ceiling? If I was Tampa, I'd kick the tires on just making Cohen my head coach, kind of like what they've did before, like move on again from the next guy in the building, but just go back to offensive and just say, hey, look at our division's not getting any easier. And Todd Bowles, I think, is also the limit on this on that organization right now. Similar to a Mike McCarthy or a Mike Tomlin is the limit on their organization. Maybe if you turn the reins over to the guy who's just really good with Baker Mayfield, you could have a fun team that maybe gets to an NFC title game. And if that's the new ceiling, that's a way more fun and exciting new ceiling for Tampa. I don't know if they'll do it, but it's just a suggestion to throw out there for them.
The Rams beat the Minnesota Vikings to a pulp, Mark. Sam Darnold looked terrible, and it's kind of funny how much of a fall from grace 2 games can,
lost $100 million.
Create. Yeah. And, that's the narrative a lot of people talking about. Will Sam Darnold be signed? Is he going to, who's going to go get him after these back-to-back performances against really, really quality opponents? But the fact that the Vikings only mustered 9 points in this game, just 1 touchdown from Sam Darnold, begs a lot to be asked of how much of this was a mirage, so to speak, throughout the year. Kevin O'Connell's clearly not the problem. He did a lot with a little. But it's also apparent that some things fall back to earth, and Sam Darnold was never this great turnaround story, maybe that we all really wanted it to be.
Yeah.
He's also not the terrible player that he was in New York. So there's, the answer's somewhere in between, but a total career resurrection may not be what's taking place here. Conversely, the Rams are the one team that has just been slowly building throughout the year. And they're getting a little bit better each week, and just kind of being in the shadows almost, which is funny because they're in LA and they have Sean McVay. They're lurking, and they're a team that not many teams are going to want to play them. This Eagles game is going to be very interesting, but no, I just think this was Sean McVay, this was Matt Stafford, this was a veteran group who's been there, done that. Exerting their dominance, and a defensive unit that knew all of the right buttons to push and put pressure. They just put a lot of pressure on Darnold, and he couldn't overcome it.
Listen,
maybe he was seeing ghosts.
We should have seen this coming last week when the Rams sat everyone, and a lot of people like, what are you doing? You're going to play the Lions or the Vikings? How dumb are you? The Vikings lost 4 games this year, 2 to the Lions, 2 to the Rams. Yeah. And part of me thinks a lot of that is because Sean McVay is the second best coach in football behind Andy Reid, and Sean McVay is not scared of anyone, and Sean McVay is a confident motherfucker, and Sean McVay also knows Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell was his OC when they won the Super Bowl, and I think he looked at it and goes, fuck, I'm not scared of that. I know exactly how to attack that. I know exactly how to make Sam Darnold uncomfortable. Now, will he have a brilliant game plan for the Eagles? He's going to need one because they have way less talent. There's not the Commanders, Lions, and the Eagles, Rams. The amount of talent disparity between the 1 and the 2 and the 4 and the 7 and the 6, it's crazy. I mean, the amount of talent disparity for these two teams.
They can't play checkers
and
in
Rams.
This one. Yeah.
No, you've got to go in there and out scheme them. That worries me for Washington. It doesn't worry me that much for LA because Sean McVay is that guy. So we'll talk more about them in a second. I will say this for the Vikings. This year, rewind 8 months ago, the Vikings were the most picked 4th to be in the division of the NFC North for all of the main pundits. I think you and I both picked them to be 4th. What Kevin O'Connell did with this team was really, really special. And we all picked them to be fourth because none of us truly believed in Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold had himself a hell of a season. He had a top 5, top 6 season for quarterbacks in the NFL this year. If I was a Steelers, a Jets, a Raiders, I would sign him to a Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith-esque 3-year, 90 million guaranteed, 100 million guaranteed. And if I were the Saints, I would do the same, depending on who you get as your coach. And I'd feel really confident for the next 3 years if I put the right pieces, like you see Tampa did. We can be a playoff team, and we can steady our ship while we figure out what the future is going to be. The problem with that is, for a lot of people, I think you also know now, like with Baker didn't fold under pressure.
Yeah, no,
and
he's
that's
got
why
moxie,
they lost.
for sure.
That
He's a true leader. Yeah,
you can make the argument, if you're a Sam Darnold hater, you have a big piece of the puzzle going in his 2 biggest games he's ever played in the last 2 weeks. The kid folded and he held on to the ball, 9 sacks. And 3 or 4 of those were guaranteed easy just because he held the ball too long and he was scared to throw a pick or a bad or whatever. If you're the Indianapolis Colts, I think you get aggressive and you sign Sam Darnold. Like you just say he's going to be our guy for the next 2 years, 3 years, and let's go with Shane Steichen and let's just do that. I think there's places for him to land, and I think he's a quality starting quarterback in the league, right up there with Baker Mayfield. Wherever I'm putting Baker Mayfield on my quarterback rankings, I guarantee you the next name on that list is going to probably be Sam Darnold. So he's not a ranked 20 quarterback in this league. The kid can play if he's in the right situation. Can I say this about Minnesota? I think Green Bay's arrow is steady to pointing up. I think Denver's arrow steady to pointing up. Same thing with LA, steady to pointing up. The Vikings arrow is shaky as hell. Dan, they have 37 free agents, the most in football. And they have 3 draft picks this year, a first rounder and then 2 fifth rounders. So that's not great. That's not great. No. And this is a Vikings team. They have a lot of things settled, right? Like you have Jefferson, you have Addison, you have Hockenson, you have your quarterback. That's all great. You have a solid offensive line. You have a couple young pieces on defense that aren't going anywhere. But you have maybe losing Harrison Smith, the veteran voice of that defense. You might be losing Brian Flores, the leader of your defense. Now, he had a bad last 2 weeks, but overall, he's still really quality. As far as a DC goes, he's the top 3 DC in the NFL. And so a lot of teams, I would love to have Brian Flores as my defensive coordinator in Chicago. I think you'd love to have him back in Pittsburgh as your defensive coordinator. And so there's a lot that is up in the air. And you throw on top of that, they're going to be starting a rookie quarterback who was the 5th quarterback taken in a draft this year, who's already dealt with a major knee surgery. And if he starts,
unproven,
if he starts 1-3 and is 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and the Vikings are 1-3 next year, the fan base is going to be like, what the fuck? We can, and especially if Darnold is, let's say he's in Indy and they're 4-0 and he's 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. You're gonna be like, what the fuck? Who cares? He bombed in the playoffs. Look, we're watching the shit football. Oh my God. So there's a lot that is on the line for the Vikings going to the year. Now, again, Vikings fans may say, Mark's a Bears fan. He's a hater. But there's some legitimate, interesting things to think about for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, on that note with the Colts, I just thought this was interesting. I wanted to bring up this little anecdote from Ian Hartitz on
Tits?
Hartitz.
That kid got made fun of.
Oh yeah. He does a lot of fantasy football stuff, but this was an interesting stat he posted. Lowest completion percentage with 300 plus pass attempts for a career. So this is a career, and obviously most of these people didn't have a full career for these obvious reasons. But the lowest completion percentage with 300 or more pass attempts since 2000. Akili Smith, I don't even know who that is. 43%.
Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Mike McMahon, 44.5%. Tim Tebow, 47.9%. Those are just hilarious. Ryan Lee, 50.2%. Anthony
list.
Richardson, 50.6%. And
It's the worst.
Jamarcus Russell, 52.1%.
He beat Jamarcus.
Jamarcus Russell. No, he didn't. He's worse than Jamarcus Russell. Jamarcus Russell is the highest of that group at 52.61%. So
he literally didn't open the playbook. That's not good.
That's brutal. That is brutal.
And so you're right. Like it's an interesting storyline, right? Going through this preview, we spent a lot of time talking about the losers, and I think it's because again you're kind of putting a book on their season. We now get to celebrate the winners, and we can spend a couple minutes here, Dan, talking about this preview.
Yes,
for these games. 4 great games. I think I think that this is going to be a great weekend of football.
Yeah, we'll start with Saturday's games. First game of the weekend is going to be the Chiefs playing host to the Texans. Kansas City favored by 8 here. At home, of course.
Houston to cover.
That's going to be the 4:30 game on ESPN. I don't know. I think,
the Chiefs don't cover.
The Chiefs don't play that. Yeah,
Dan, the Chiefs are going to win.
They're not blowing out.
It's going to be 23-23. It's fourth quarter, 1 minute left. Texans just kicked the field goal to tie it, and Mahomes is going to run,
Bucker.
26-23. I mean, the Chiefs are going to win. They're going to win.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah.
You're
probably right.
I don't smell blowout at all. I will say the one thing the Chiefs have going for them, I think the weather on Saturday, it's going to be worse on Sunday. They're lucky this game's playing on Saturday, but it's going to be like with the wind chill, like 12-ish degrees, something like that. The early reports, no snow.
Kansas City's defense can contend with Joe Mixon and like that. Strength, it plays right into their strength.
It does. Yeah. And I just think Houston, I wonder how the Dome Houston team will handle that weather.
That's fair.
Now CJ Stroud played, he's a Georgia kid, but played Ohio State. Like he's not unaccustomed to like I guess, bad weather.
The elements. Yeah. But that is something to think about.
If the Chiefs blow out the Texans, I will honestly say I will be surprised. Like I will, because that's what they haven't done it all year. They haven't done it. They have the lowest point differential for a team with this many wins in NFL history. Their point differential is the point differential of a team that was like 9-8, not a team that was 15-2. And so I truly think again, the Chiefs are winning Super Bowls last year and this year because they have the best coach, the best quarterback, and Chris Jones. And they are literally just, it's like they're like the snake in fucking Jungle Book. And they're just kind of like, ooh, luring you. And you're like, oh, maybe we can win this game. I might win this game. And then they're just like, nope, dead. Yeah. And I can't wait to watch the Chiefs play too. I mean, I'm not sick of the Chiefs yet. If it's Chiefs Lions, I'm going to be rooting for the Lions. You know what I mean? Like if it's
definitely.
If it's if it's Chiefs versus
if it's Chiefs Bills in the championship, are you going to be rooting for the Bills?
No, I'll be rooting for the Bills. Yeah, but I'm not like fucking Chiefs. The Chiefs fucking suck.
I agree. Well, I appreciate dominance, and especially the fact that they've dominated in different ways in such a short span. Like it's amazing. They can
Patrick
win.
Mahomes used to throw 50 touchdowns. He didn't even make the Pro Bowl this year, and yet I
was talking with Steven Rogers about this. Like Patrick Mahomes is having Tom Brady's career almost in reverse, where he dominated himself from the start. He was the reason they won.
And now he's just part of the team.
And now he's got an amazing defense. He's got other guys that can kind of help balance things out. And it's like it's playing out perfectly for him. But I also think what's fascinating about this, Mark, is if you just told somebody who knew, like remove their knowledge of like NFL, but they know football and everything like that, and you just told them a concept of, okay, there's this team in the playoffs. They have won 2 championships in a row. Nobody's ever won 3 in a row. They're searching for their 3rd title in a row. They've won 4 of them in the last 5-6 years. And they're not even a top 3 team facing pressure this in the final 8 teams in the playoffs. You'd be like, what? How does that make sense? But they're not. The Bills are under all the pressure right now. They're at home. Josh Allen has to get there and win. The Ravens are under a shit ton of pressure because they have to they have to win with this window they have in Lamar and get the monkey off the
Texans
back
have
type of
less
thing.
pressure than the Chiefs. I think the
Oh,
Texans
absolutely.
have,
No, I'm
yeah,
saying there are 3 teams that have more pressure than the Chiefs in the final 8 right now. And that's the Bills,
yeah,
the Ravens,
Ravens.
and the Lions. Because the Lions, like they've got to get there. They've got to win. Like this is
Yeah,
like
this is their
the
year.
whole city, the pressure, everything. The Chiefs, man, if they lose, it's like,
I would argue
hey,
the
we're
Eagles
still
have more
dominating.
pressure. I'd argue the Eagles
Right?
have more
There
pressure
you go.
than
Okay, yeah, then
the Chiefs
yeah.
too.
But so like that's kind of crazy that the Chiefs going for a three-peat with having to,
They're
having
no
all the
good.
haters and naysayers, they can kind of come really loose and chill into this
Oh.
matchup,
I know I
and
know
they're
the
at
guys.
home, like
I know
just
the guys that
stroll in.
for frequency's sake, we're gonna release our probably picks on like Friday or whatever is like official picks. Early pick, are you on the Chiefs?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm on the Texans to cover, but I'm on the Chiefs to win. Yeah.
Yep, most definitely. The other game that evening is going to be Lions Commanders. Lions playing host to Washington. Really excited for this matchup too. I think it's going to be a fun, entertaining game. I would pick the over. I don't even know what the over is on this. I'll have to
Just
look
pick
this
it.
up.
Just bet it
But
because
pick
it's
it.
fun.
Yeah, it's going to be offensive fireworks. I think Detroit is favored by 10. That's hefty. But man, I think Detroit can really control a lot in this game early, and then like Washington's just like coming back in like the whole second half is like garbage time back for score for score. But I think the Lions build up an early lead that's almost insurmountable. Because their offense can't be stopped. I think the Washington defense is going to have a real tough time in this one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we'll see if the Lions defense that's played way above their talent level, if they can rise to that occasion too. But I have a feeling, it's going to be early. They just turn over here. Lions go up 14-0, and then Washington makes it a game late, like 31-21, I would say is like what I anticipate the
I
final.
will say the Dan Campbell Lions have struggled. The one thing they've really struggled with in his tenure is running quarterbacks. Now they handled
That's
Josh
over
Allen.
53.5, so I'll have to amend that score because I think I had
Yeah.
that 52 points, but whatever.
Yeah, I think the Lions win and cover. I think it's 35 and I think it's 35, whatever, 20
24.
or something like that.
Yeah.
I think there's moments early in the second quarter where it's like 13-13 or 14-13 and it's like, "Oh, this is kind of a fun game." And then the Lions will go on a run. And the Lions offense is just so special. I also think Ben Johnson, it's like a crowning moment. I think he's like, I really do think he's going to show the fuck off. And I think he's going to put on a game plan that is going to be aggressive because it fits Dan Campbell's system and it's going to be fun. And I just think their Lions to me are offensively such a well-oiled machine. They're not going to be worried about it at all. And I think that
I think you're right.
It's gonna be a fun game, but I'm not. I think the Lions win. I might actually take the Lions to cover too.
I'm really excited to watch all of these games. Not that I wouldn't in any situation, but like these matchups are particularly enticing, I feel.
It's good matchups.
We'll go to the Sunday games. Eagles Rams, the first one there. Philly favored to win by 6.5. I would stay away from that personally, but I still have Philly winning it.
I'm taking the Rams.
Roster rise. Okay, yeah, it's fair. Hey, you've been on the Rams train all season long, so it's worth continuing here.
I got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And I think again, you look at this, Dan, and I think it's a lot of human nature in this game, right? A lot of people would argue, oh, what happens when a good team plays a bad game, but they win? They usually bounce back and have a really good game, right? That's Philly. They won, but it was ugly. It wasn't their best. And, A.J. Brown only one catch, the book on the sidelines. They're at home. They should bounce back and have a really good game. I think they will. But I also think the Rams right now have the second best coach in the playoffs, and they have a quarterback who's the best in the NFC. And when you have Nakua and Kupp, we'll see what Higbee's injury status is. But even
tough.
Allen and Kyron Williams is a really nice running back. Again, he's not like jump off the screen Hall of Famer, but he is a real weapon for them, schemed offensively, a weapon. And also, yes, the defense is not nearly as good as the Eagles defense, but they're peaking at the right time. And if they can put pressure on the quarterback in a similar way that they did, I don't think Jalen Hurts can beat the Rams. I don't. I think Saquon can beat the Rams. I think the Eagles can beat the Rams. I don't think Jalen Hurts can beat the Rams. And I think that Matt Stafford, with that rest, he wasn't touched against the Vikings.
Yeah.
With that energy, you get that first game out of the way with the energy of we've lost our homes, the city's burning, we have this emotional thing. That bubble could have burst in a loss to the Vikings. It didn't. But you got that kind of rip the Band-Aid of like, okay, and now you get to just focus back in on football. I know they have a day's less of rest and they have to travel. I think it's lower scoring, and I think it's
I agree with that.
really tight. And then I think it's Matthew Stafford leading a drive to win it. I'm going to take the Rams to win 24-20. I think they're down 20-17, and Matt Stafford leads them on a touchdown drive late in the fourth. And then the Rams defense pins their ears back and they make Jalen Hurts do something dumb late in the game when he has to go win the game.
I just think the Eagles defensive front is going to put enough pressure on Matthew Stafford to where it's going to be a longer day. Now they do have the weapons to get that short game going. And so that's going to be probably the way that they're able to combat that early on. And so how the Eagles, back half responds will be telling. It looks like Nakobe Dean had a serious injury. That's brutal for the Eagles.
Brutal.
But I do think that just those matchups in the trenches favor Philly. And I think in a game like this that I do also anticipate to be low scoring, that's kind of ultimately what gets them that win. And then sprinkle in their ability to convert fourth and shorts better than anybody.
And it will be cold.
There's going to be a couple occasions. What's that?
And it will be cold in Philly. I hate that's going against me, but
yeah, that's a tough one for the Rams too. So I'm going to pick Philly in this game, but I have it super close, so I'm not going to pick them to cover. But I think it'll be 24-20 Philadelphia gets the win.
And I'll go 24-20 Rams. It'll be interesting. I think we agree that's the game that I think has the recipe to be like the closest, like truly a nail biter and more of a coin flip. Because I think the game we're about to talk about, I think it's going to be a great game, but I don't think the recipe calls for maybe more disparity than the Eagles-Rams.
Yeah, the Bills-Ravens is an interesting one because it does have the instant, sex appeal of being a complete shootout and an awesome, a la the Rams, Chiefs, Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes from years ago. But this could also be, you wouldn't be shocked if this was a 20-17 game.
No, these defenses
just the way that these defenses
right
have been playing. Yeah. And they're opportunistic and it's going to come down to like the turnover, like who is turning the ball over. Cause neither of these quarterbacks turn the ball over anymore. So who's going to do it? And that's going to be the big question. I think the Ravens are a better team. I think Josh Allen is the best player on the field. And so it's super tough. I think overall, I got to go Ravens in this one. I think the Ravens just have the makeup right now to win this game. I won't be shocked in the slightest if the Bills win this game. But I've got to take the Ravens because of Derrick Henry and Lamar. Zay Flowers should be back. There's just too many playmakers for them across the board. And I think their defense as a unit is better than the Bills defense, even though the Bills defense seems to be better at getting takeaways.
And they're peaking right now.
So who's going to make a mistake?
I think you nailed it. I think you've absolutely nailed it. It is literally who's going to make a big mistake. And I think that,
because Lamar has a propensity to do so more than Josh recently, right? So I guess that goes against my argument.
Because
Baltimore favored in this one, by the way.
I know, which is wild. Which
on the road, yeah.
I think that's a huge thing. I think the Bills are going to use that. I think the Bills. I'm going with the Bills. I think that.
Do we know what the weather report is for this one?
I think it's going to be cold, but I don't think we have to worry about snow. You can look it up. I'll say this.
Yeah.
I think Cook is a difference maker. Cook has a nose for the end zone. Cook is a home run
Yeah.
hitter.
He scores
And
touchdowns.
he is a true RB1. And the Ravens are going to have to deal with that. This is a Bills team also that is absolutely loaded with the wide receiver core. Yes, the Ravens have 2 great tight ends and Zay Flowers back, but the Bills have a very good tight end and then 3 really game-changing, all very different wide receivers. Cooper, your traditional 1, Coleman, the big physical over the top, and Shakir, the slot guy who just is like a Lad McConkey, like knack
Always
for the
open.
football, always open.
Yeah.
So they can beat you on all 3 levels. And then you also have to deal with Kincaid, who's an above average NFL tight end. And don't forget about Cook. Oh, and Josh Allen, who is a touchdown machine himself, passing and running. This game being in Buffalo is why I like the Bills. I think this atmosphere in the night in Buffalo.
By the way, 20 degrees and possibly some light snow. So relatively decent conditions, but yeah.
I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere. I see Josh Allen crowning himself. I see there's a coronation of Josh Allen. I think if the Ravens win this game, and they're very capable of winning this game, it's because Derrick Henry just cannot be stopped. And it's Derrick Henry has 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they control the ball. Because I truly believe in my heart of hearts, if Lamar Jackson has to win the game, he'll make the mistake. And I know it goes against what he's done this year because he hasn't turned the ball over. But Lamar Jackson, remember, in the playoffs last year, had a great first round. And then you got to the AFC title game, that second game, and it wiltered. It wiltered. And Josh Allen has never been the problem in the playoffs. Now, last year, their embarrassing playoff loss, again, it wasn't on Allen. They just didn't have the team. They didn't have the culture the way it needed to be to compete in the playoffs last year. The Bills have that this year. The Bills started slow and did not panic, and then onslaught of points. I think Joe Brady and this offensive game plan is really, really unique. I like the Bills. I like the Bills to win 27-17.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. By 10. That's quite a win there.
I think it's being in Buffalo and this Bills defense. I'm feeling pretty confident about the Bills.
I'm gonna go Ravens 28, Bills 24.
Great game.
And I mean, yeah, I just think it's gonna be a really good game. I'm excited to watch it. This is the Super Bowl. I think this is gonna be the matchup of the year that we all want to watch.
So part of my predictions too is I'm being selfish. I want Allen versus Mahomes in Kansas
That'd be
City.
great. That'd be awesome.
And I want Jared Goff and the Lions hosting Matt Stafford and the Rams. I want those storylines again. That Rams-Lions playoff game last year in the first round was awesome. Mm-hmm. I want that again. I want as many games in Detroit as possible because that atmosphere is, as we saw last year in the playoffs, the hardest place to play on the planet. I think the Lions would have beaten the Niners if that game was in Detroit, which it should have been because they got screwed in that game against Dallas last year, if you remember. And so I think there's a team of destiny vibe for the Lions. I feel very confident about that. And I can't wait to watch a playoff game in Detroit. And I really, really, really think that Baltimore, Buffalo, I hope it's a great game. I'd be really pissed if one of the teams wins 37 to 12. Like, I'll be pissed because I want
10-0.
Yeah, I want it to be what we had with the 13 seconds Mahomes Allen game. I want it to be, we look back and we're like, we were there for that game. I want it.
Yeah. No, I'm excited for the week.
Do you think Buffalo versus Kansas City is a better game than Baltimore versus Kansas City? I think Buffalo Kansas City is a better game than Baltimore.
I do, but I think it's also like the baggage that's brought with it matters. Like, I think the fact that the Bills are then once again one game away from the Super Bowl and a chance to get their first in history, like, I think that matters with that matchup. I also think
the Ravens, though, it's the same thing. It's a rematch of the AFC
Mahomes.
title game. Only this time it's in Kansas City. But that game was such a dud last year. We don't think of the rivalry, right? Like we think of the rivalry with
Exactly.
the Bills. The
Yeah.
Chiefs handled the Ravens so easily last year, and it was such an ugly game that we don't think of that as the rivalry. And so I'm with you. I think for ratings for us for Juice, I want it to be Bills Chiefs. I want it to be Lions Rams, and that's
Yeah.
kind of how I'm predicting it as well.
Really excited for the week ahead. A lot to look forward to. We will, of course, be back here next week, recapping it all and looking ahead to championship weekend.
Glad
Before
your
we leave,
internet
Mark.
held up.
Yeah, it held up finally. And I did want to circle back real quick before we ended because I know you had mentioned, and we went too long in the segment anyway, but you had mentioned you had a couple questions you wanted to lob my way regarding the Steelers, and I didn't know if those were answered or if
Well, one of them was because we talked about like the coordinators. Because my first was like, do you want like Arthur Smith fired? Like, because I think that was like that whole. But we kind of discussed that. So the other big one is, who do you want? Who do you envision as the starting quarterback for the Steelers next year? Because Russell Wilson says he wants to be back, and also on the counterpoint to that, do you think, as you talked about Mike Tomlin's own hubris kind of getting in his way, do you think there was a huge mistake not playing Justin Fields maybe down the stretch of the season?
Absolutely.
When you lose 5 games in a row, like the spark, where's the spark?
Not even, not to put him in. Obviously, he got injured and he was out for a couple games. But even when he came back, they were way too slow to like throw him back out there. No, they should have absolutely used Fields in more of the red zone opportunities in the short, third and short, fourth and short situations, 100%. I think who will be back next year is Russ. I think they're going to run it back with Russ. It is not what I would wish for to happen. I think they should run it back with Justin Fields next year. Let Russ walk. Justin had his, prove it moments, went 4-2, and then got to sit behind Russ and learn from Russ and handled it like a pro, was great. And you give a full season with Fields and you see what happens. Either it doesn't pan out and, well, it's can't be much worse than what it was this year. Because they're not going to bottom out, right? They're going to go 9-8 or 10-7 next year. So I'd rather do that with Justin and find out for sure over the whole, course of a season who you got there, and then you figure out what you're doing after that. That would be my ultimate. I don't think bringing in a Sam Darnold. No.
Okay, and you don't want to draft a guy.
I still think that the ceiling is limited regardless of any of those, like unless they were to somehow acquire via trade a Joe Burrow, they're not going to elevate themselves to the 12-13 wins and dominate good
what
teams.
What about Aaron Rodgers?
Sam Darnold.
I've seen photoshops of Aaron Rodgers in Steelers.
Do not want it. It's not behind that offensive line either. Like and not with an Arthur Smith offense that requires boots and a lot of movement there. That's no. I don't want to play that game. I want to do the experiments. And I'd rather do it with Fields.
Yeah,
because I firmly believe they're 10-7 this season with Fields or Russ. It looked a little bit different. It was going to look a little bit different probably.
Yeah.
And maybe your explosive play down the field would be limited with Fields, but hey, you would have had more explosive plays on the ground with Fields.
If you ask the guys in the locker room, I think they'd absolutely say, "Give me Justin Fields." Like the Russell Wilson, he wears on people. You see his like phony pep talks on the sideline and stuff, and people are just tuning him out. They're like, dude, and it's not that Russell's a bad player; he's a productive, fine player. But it's just like there's something about him where it's just like,
shtick.
Everyone's looking at him like, fucking guy again. It's just don't stop.
Well, dude, and I mean, we saw sparks of the or moments of the issues that he had in Denver and towards the end of his career in Seattle. Like he's a one read guy. He goes to his hot route, and if it's not there, it's check down. That's we saw them talk about him on Hard Knocks. The Ravens staff were saying he's 3-pointers or layups. That's what he is.
Yeah.
And I'd rather go with a more dynamic player in Justin, a taller traditional quarterback that can, if you can get him to work within the pocket, I think that there's still a ceiling there. Where
and maybe you draft a guy, in the second, third, fourth round.
I absolutely advocate drafting a, top 3 round quarterback and see what you got there. But also, Mark, they need to hit on their first rounders. I mean, we're looking back through the list. I mean, we're talking about like Terrell Edmonds, Devin Bush, Kenny Pickett. Like, there's a lot of first round picks that they have not. They've hit on a lot of deeper draft picks, but you got to hit on your first rounders. And I know it's hard, but that's also what happens when you're drafting 21st overall every year. But it is what it is. But yeah,
can't wait for it.
Be my hope, but we'll
can't
see.
Wait.
A lot more to talk to about these 8 teams that have deservedly given us reason to talk about that.
We may try to record maybe next Monday because we don't have a Monday night.
We'll talk. Monday night football game.
You and I can talk offline and we'll figure it out, and we'll let the people know when we'll be back.
Absolutely. All right. Looking forward to it. Appreciate the support, everybody. Again, if you are listening to this, watching it after the fact, we do live streams now. These are live recordings, and we'd love for you to come and chat with us during the show. And check out our YouTube channel, subscribe there. That'll help you get notified when we do go live. But for now, he's Mark. I'm Dan. This is the Football Lounge, and we'll be back at it next week with a full recap and look ahead to championship weekend.
This has been a For Frequency Sake Podcast Network production. For more great content, subscribe to For Frequency Sake on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.